Okay, here we're back. I'm Larry Stein, Stein On Stuttering, and I'm here with Lois Cookie Green, the great website, no, Facebook site, I should say, From Stuttering to Confidence. And this is, we do this now and then on Mondays, and Cookie asked me a question that she's thinking about. Go ahead, Cookie, what is it today?
Okay, I just wanted to kind of say with my question, most people, they would love to speak fluently. And when they hear people that speak fluently, they have a tendency to say, I wonder, does that person stutter, or has that person ever stuttered? Or if they did, was it small? How did they become smooth? That's impossible. What I'd like to hear you talk about is just give us a little bit of history of where you came from, how bad or what was the extent of your stutter, and then give us a little brief path on how you got to where you are today. That would
Okay. All right. So yes, at times I was very severe stutter. Just an overview, when I was young and in my teens and my 20s, I would say it was pretty severe. It was pretty severe. And I'll give you an example. And then in my 30s and 40s, when I got into the business world, I was always trying to hide from speaking situations. So I compromised my career. I always wanted to be in the investment field, which I'm now in.
right.
But in my 30s and 40s, well, 20s too, I ended up becoming an accountant because I thought I wouldn't have to talk much. I literally got a CPA, a master's in tax, all to get out of having to talk. But I actually did have to talk in those professions, but I just didn't fit into that world. And I always longed to be in the investment field, which I'm now in. And so I really gave up my career for that. I did that in college, and I hated college. I hated work. I hated myself. And then really it was only in my 50s, but through being in the work, my speech improved a lot. But I was still not able to say my name until I was 57. I was not able to call strangers with, it would be very, very difficult. I'd gotten good at small talk in my 30s and 40s and early 50s, but it was really in my mid 50s over a 2-year period where I worked through. Okay, so let me give you some examples. I think that's what you're asking for, right?
I know.
So, of course, like everyone else who stutters, reading time in elementary school was brutal. Waiting for your turn to read and counting down the number of people who it would be to read. I remember in, I don't know, second or third grade when we would go around the room and we'd have to read a certain word. And I remember, having to say the word love. And it was kind of an emotionally charged thing because you're, 8 or 9 years old, whatever. And I go, love, I mean, that was me. That's what I sounded like that. And frankly, it was worse because I kind of pulled myself out of that, but I could feel myself even now getting caught in the very severe stutter. But that's what I looked like, but it was worse because my head was shaking, more tension here. After I had a conversation or even just said some words, my jaw would be really hurting. I remember going to overnight camp, and I come off the bus and they ask your name. They have a clipboard and they're checking off the kids. And I said my name, and afterward, the guy, who was very nice, he said, do you have other problems like hearing? Can you hear what I'm saying? And I said, yes, I can hear you. things like that. So when I would say my name, it would be the same thing that if I was 5 years old or 55 years old. At that point, going to camp, maybe I was 9 or 10, and this is how it would be. Larry, it's done. But again, it would be worse than that because I pulled myself out of that. But I mean, that's how severe I was. I remember going to Disneyland with my family. I'd never been on a plane before. I was 16 years old, and in those days, the big attraction was the TV studio, and it was McHale's Navy, and I loved that show. And the MC running the exhibit said, "I'm going to call up 2 people," and he picks this woman who's in her 40s, and she comes up, she's very happy, and she gives her name, and then he looks around the room and he chooses me, and as he's looking around the room, I'm going, "Oh, don't choose me," even though I really wanted to be up there. I mean, I really wanted to be up there so badly, but at the same time, I knew he was going to ask my name, and I didn't want to be up there.
Right.
And he's like looking around. I go, "Oh, don't pick me, don't." And then he picks me, and he asked my name, and you would have forgotten that same thing that I just did for you. I remember being in college, and an economics professor, called on me. This is, I don't know, junior year in college, and I, couldn't get anything out. And he said, "You always talk like that?" I mean, it was really embarrassing. And I said no, but I did. Every new job I had, brutal. Interviewing, brutal. I mean, it was just. But I could I could be okay in small talk once in a while. And in my 30s and 40s, I actually became pretty good with small talk.
Right.
And so, but if you asked me something, I would be tremendously defensive, and I'd have a lot of problems. Or I couldn't ask a question, for example. For me to ask a question was like a really huge deal. And I don't think I asked a question of a person until. And I mean, I am still like really kind of shaken from going back into stuttering mode. I mean, I'm kind of sore here. I'm kind of jittery, honestly. How did I get here? Just in very short terms. I was on the board of a very small nonprofit. My cousin worked at the nonprofit. They needed some younger people. Everyone was very old in this board, and they needed new blood. And they asked a bunch of people. I was one of them because I was her cousin. And so I went on this board. A few years later, they wanted to get a new president. The president was probably in his 80s at the time, and a lot of people were in their 70s and 80s, and they asked me to be the president. And of course, I said no, because I knew I would have to lead board meetings. And by this time, I had led meetings with a few people. But not, 15, 20, 30 people. And I also would have to do occasionally, maybe 4 or 5 speeches a year for about 5 to 10 minutes. And the last time I had given a speech, it was a 10-minute speech that I prepared. I was in my late 20s, so this is now 25 years later. But it's the last time I'd given a speech, and it was only to, like 20 people in the room. That 10-minute speech took 28 minutes. So you can imagine how heavily I stuttered for a 10-minute speech to take 28 minutes. A lot. And I just kept on telling them no, and they kept on asking. And then the only other person they had who would do the job was 85 years old at the time. And so I kind of gave in. But in doing that, I was exposed to new speaking situations. In the beginning, in the board meetings, I had a lot of trouble. But so when I got to doing the public speaking stuff, there were little 5-minute talks. You know, maybe 100 people in the room, 150, maybe 200 at the most.
Nice. Yeah.
So I really learned a lot from that. And I hearkened back to when I was in speech therapy. And I remembered in one of the speech therapies, they had me do phrasing. And so for some reason, I was so nervous, and I began phrasing during this public speaking stuff. Not in real life, only in these board meetings and in these speeches. And one night I realized, wow, I could speak better when I public speak. I literally speak better when I public speak in these board meetings and these speeches. Why don't I just public speak all the time? So I threw away how I talk. I said, this is how I'm going to talk. I'm going to speak phrase to phrase to phrase, and I'm going to throw away how I talk. This all happened in 20 seconds. I'm telling you the truth. It was 9:40 at night. I'm walking out of a board meeting, all upset, you know, that this board is just a bunch of old people doing nothing. And it hits me. I speak better when I public speak. So that's when I decided. And I was incredibly dedicated to it because I was beginning to see a little progress.
Right.
And so phrasing was the start. And then these are longer conversations, but I added breathing to that and being expressive and emphasizing words. And that's how I came up to the breathe, emphasize, phrase.
Yeah.
Just to keep it simple. But it's nothing I invented. It's just I was watching people on TV like Matt Lauer and other people.
Hey.
Lauer of the Today Show, and I was mimicking him. I was literally mimicking him. And I, just thought about, all right, so what is he doing? What are these other public speakers doing? And I had some, interesting interactions. This is all in this book that I'm coming out in a couple months, by the way. And so my speech improved a lot, but if I was trying to go from here to there, maybe it took me, less than halfway to where I wanted to go. All I wanted to do was to build my business because I had begun a business like the year before this, and I loved it, but I hardly had any clients, and I was going to, it was getting a little nervous. We needed more clients, more money coming in, or it was going to be a very bad situation. So my back was against the wall. So I was incredibly desperate. And I'm watching Matt Lauer, I'm watching all these other public speakers, and my speech improved. And then I realized something that kind of scared me, it stunned me, that 50 years of stuttering, here I am at 50, 55, 56, and that 50 years of stuttering really messed me up. That all the trauma from all this, all the difficult situations, I was really messed up, and I had to address that stuff. So in other words, avoiding situations, avoiding talking, always boiling down what I wanted to say to the barest amount of words, if I saw someone coming toward me I didn't know and I thought they may ask my name, I'd run the other way. I would say no to everything. I would not, I would play sports with people. I would go drinking with people, but I wouldn't, but I couldn't be in a group talking with people. I would shy away from that. I, lost a lot of potential friends from that. So, so I began working on that, and the only thing I could come up with was I'm going to do the opposite. Rather than avoid, I'm going to go toward a conversation. And I just did the opposite in everything I did, and that made a big impact. And so I, relearned to speak with BEP, and I kind of retrained my brain, by in the moment changing what I'm doing and thinking. And then I went after speaking situations, one after the other, and that's when I really began to improve. Now, everyone talks about breaking out of your comfort zone, and I did that, but I did it in very small steps, because I realized that over the years I had tried to take big steps and I always fell flat on my face. And if you're in sports, that's great. If you're in business, go for big goals. But with stuttering, I was so damaged that I realized I had to take very small steps and be patient with myself. And sometimes these were insignificant steps, and I learned that even the most insignificant steps, as long as it's toward my goal, that was okay. That was positive, and I stacked one success after the other, and I began to feel more confidence, and it just mushroomed. I mean, after a while, I was looking for speaking situations to conquer. I felt like I was knocking down doors. It was exhilarating. And finally, after about 2 years, I was able to tackle my highest goal, which was to say my name, to introduce myself. And how I did that was for weeks, if not months, I would, introduce myself in super easy situations. I, call hardware stores, ask for a hammer, but I'd first introduce myself, that kind of thing. I would introduce myself to little kids, to babies, people who had no interest. And one really old guy years later said, you introduced yourself to me like 5 different times. It's just, if I ever had a name tag on at a business meeting, I'd introduce myself to everyone because they already know my name. So it was an introduction. And then at the end, what I did was I was in this, I had joined a new synagogue, and 150 people there for a luncheon, and I just walked around introducing myself, first to old women, then to old men, then to women, and then old men, and then finally, and over a 3-week period of doing a million introductions, I finally felt comfortable. And so that's the really short version.
That's a good, yeah.
And that's how I got to this point. And even after all that, there have been things that I've had to work on. And I'm not a perfect speaker. Like if I'm in a foreign country, I can be thrown off. Things are, they're speaking in different languages. I'm not sure what they're saying. I don't know where I am. Maybe in a marketplace, things are going really fast. I'm not used to that. I can be thrown off. But for the most part, this is how I speak all the time. And people who now know me, they don't know that I ever stuttered. And there's this guy who he was actually just honored as he was just honored as the top neuropsychologist in the United States.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to know him. And he and I knew each other for a couple of years. And I told him that I was writing this book on my experience with stuttering. He said, I study people for a living. He has his own laboratory at the University of Illinois. I mean, he's a full professor. He gives talks all over the world on this stuff. And he said, I had no idea that you stuttered. So, but, this took a lot of work, but it was difficult at first, but then it became became exhilarating. It became an adventure, and I looked at the world as my laboratory. And so, and it changed me. This is not what I was, you know, before I began this thing. And it's been 10 years now since I worked through all this stuff. I haven't had any, you know, remissions. I haven't had any backtracking. I don't have bad days. I don't, you know, bad things happen in my life, but that doesn't impact my speech. So this is where I want to be. And I'm happy you asked the question.
Answered. Oh, wow. Powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much, because people want to just see that just so that they can relate. Because, you know, it's almost like if you wanted to have somebody teach you something, you want somebody who you want to be like, but they have to understand where you've come from. So I feel by us understanding that you are somebody who came from the same place as we have, it is doable. It is
doable.
Work, but doable. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for that.
Always a pleasure to be with you. Let's do it again.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.